The shutdown of the Starkiller network created a wave of energy that swept across the galaxy like a healing touch. As ancient machines powered down and the threat of galactic annihilation faded, something unprecedented happened throughout Zephyrian space. Young crystal beings, inspired by human ideals of freedom, began to rebel against their own government. Commander Paul Jackson lay dying in the throne chamber, his blood pooling on crystal floors that had never seen violence. But his sacrifice had given Dr. Rodriguez the time she needed to reverse the Starkiller protocol. Instead of destroying every sun in the galaxy, the network began restoring stars that had been drained centuries ago. High Counselor Veltanos watched his empire dissolve not through conquest, but through conversion. Across his communication channels, reports poured in of Zephyrian colonies declaring independence, of crystal ships joining human liberation fleets, of entire worlds choosing freedom over the ancient order. "It's over," Jackson whispered as Turner knelt beside him. "Tell them we kept our promise." Major Rebecca Turner held the dying human's hand as explosions echoed through the spire. Around them, the last Imperial guards laid down their weapons, their will to fight broken by the sight of their own people joining the rebellion. "The promise is kept," Turner said softly. "The galaxy is free." 5 years later, Ambassador Lisa Rodriguez stood in the chambers of the Galactic Federation, representing not just humanity, but the principles they had spread across the stars. The circular chamber housed delegates from over 300 species, each governing themselves but united in common cause. "The motion passes unanimously," she announced. "The Slavery Abolition Treaty is now galactic law. No sentient being may be owned, controlled, or forced to serve against their will." The chamber erupted in celebration as representatives from dozens of former slave species cheered the final death of an institution that had plagued the galaxy for millennia. In the gallery, former Zephyrian commander Zekthara, now calling himself Marcus, applauded alongside human veterans of the Liberation War. Marcus had become something impossible under the old empire, a Zephyrian who chose his own name, his own path, his own beliefs. He worked now with Admiral Clark to establish the Galactic Defense Fleet, their joint crews representing the ultimate victory of human philosophy over ancient prejudice. "Strange to think we were enemies once," Marcus said as he and Clark watched new recruits train together, crystal beings and humans learning to fight side by side. "We were never enemies," Clark replied. "We just didn't know each other yet." Henri Mao. Earth children learned about the Liberation War in schools built on every continent, but the lessons weren't about human superiority or military victory. Instead, they learned about the power of refusing to accept injustice, regardless of the odds. These children grew up in a galaxy where slavery was extinct and every species had a voice. Captain Stephen Wright, now serving as director of the Galactic Defense Council, oversaw construction of new generation starships. These vessels represented something unprecedented in galactic history, technology designed not for conquest or even defense, but for exploration and peaceful contact with unknown civilizations. "Long-range sensors are picking up signals from beyond the galactic rim," Wright reported during the monthly council meeting. "There's something out there, and it's big." The threat came from a direction no one expected, another galaxy entirely. Deep space monitoring stations detected massive energy signatures moving between the stars, ships that made Zephyrian crystal vessels look like toys. Early contact attempts met with silence, then with violence that made the Empire's conquest seem gentle by comparison. Dr. Rodriguez, now director of the Galactic Research Initiative, led teams developing new technologies based on the simple, human principle that there was always a better way. Their breakthrough came in quantum communication networks that allowed instant coordination across galactic distances, turning the entire galaxy into a single, coordinated defense network. "If they want to fight," Rodriguez told the emergency session of the Federation Council, "they'll get one. But this time, we stand together." The first skirmishes with the extragalactic invaders proved that humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy wasn't military tactics or technological innovation. It was the idea that different species could work together as equals, each contributing their unique strengths to a common cause. Former enemies fought side by side as the invaders pressed deeper into Federation space. Crystal ships used Kalari, stealth technology, while human crews operated Threx gravitational weapons. The diversity that had once divided the galaxy became its greatest strength. The final scene of this chapter in galactic history took place at the launch of the first extragalactic expedition. Captain Sarah Mitchell commanded a ship crewed by representatives from every known species, carrying with them not just hope for the future, but proof that the fire of freedom could burn brighter than any darkness. "Remember," Mitchell told her, diverse crew as they prepared for the journey beyond the galaxy's edge, "we're not going out there to conquer or to rule. We're going to meet whatever's out there as equals, to offer friendship instead of fear." The expedition ship disappeared into the cosmic void between galaxies, its mission to make contact with civilizations beyond their own spiral arm. As it vanished from long-range sensors, the galaxy it left behind continued to heal from millennia of oppression. Stars that had been dark for centuries blazed with new life. Species that had been slaves for generations learned to govern themselves. And throughout it all, the simple human truth echoed across space, that the fire of freedom, once lit, burns brighter than any star and spreads faster than any darkness can contain it. The galaxy burned brighter now, not with stolen light, but with the fire of hope itself. The siege of Zephyros Prime began at dawn on a day that would reshape galactic history. Admiral Clark stood on the command deck of the Defiance, watching as 1,000 ships from dozens of species formed the largest fleet ever assembled. Each vessel carried crews united not by blood or species, but by the human idea that freedom was worth dying for. "All fleet commanders report ready," announced Lieutenant Amy Foster. "Liberation forces are in position around the planet." Clark studied the tactical display showing the Zephyrian capital world. The planet's surface glowed with the light of crystal cities that had stood since before most species achieved spaceflight. Around it, the remnants of the Imperial fleet formed defensive rings, their ships beautiful and deadly in the starlight. "Begin the assault," Clark ordered. "Remember, we're not here to destroy a world, we're here to free it." On the planet's surface, Major Rebecca Turner led combined forces through the crystal cities, structures that seemed to grow from the ground like living things. The Zephyrians fought with desperate fury, using weapons that could tear holes in reality itself. Energy beams turned buildings to vapor, gravity bombs crushed entire city blocks, and crystal guardians that stood 30 feet tall marched through the streets. But Turner's forces had learned to fight in conditions that would kill most species. Human Marines advanced through radiation fields that cooked their armor. Kalari engineers maintained equipment in gravitational storms that twisted space itself, and Threx warriors charged crystal guardians with nothing but determination and explosives. "Turner to all ground units," she radioed as her team fought through the outer defenses of the central spire. "Remember what we're fighting for. Every person on every world who wants to breathe free air." Deep in the spire, High Counselor Veltanos watched his empire crumble through crystal displays that showed battles across the galaxy. His perfect civilization, built over 10,000 years, was falling to creatures that refused to accept the natural order of things. A new report arrived from the outer systems. "High Counselor, the humans have activated the Star Restoration Protocol. Dead suns are beginning to burn again." Veltanos felt something he had never experienced in his long life. True fear. Dr. Rodriguez and her research teams had not only learned to stop Zephyrian star harvesting, they had reversed it. Across the galaxy, stars that had been drained to fuel the Empire were blazing back to life, and with them came hope for countless species. "How much time before the final protocol is ready?" he asked. 6 hours, High Counselor. The Star Killer network will be fully charged and ready to create the Galactic Cascade." Veltanos nodded grimly. If the Zephyrian Empire could not rule the galaxy, then the galaxy would burn. Every star would be forced to go supernova simultaneously, creating a chain reaction that would consume all life within 100,000 light-years. Commander Paul Jackson led his assault team through the spire's inner defenses, fighting Imperial guards that had never known defeat. These ancient warriors moved with crystal precision, their weapons channeling the power of dead stars, but they had never faced enemies that viewed their own death as acceptable collateral damage. "Jackson to Turner," he radioed as explosions rocked the spire around him. "We're 3 levels from the throne chamber. Resistance is heavy." "Copy that, Jackson," Turner replied. "Keep pushing. We're running out of time." The battle through the spire became a nightmare of crystal and fire. Human Marines used demolition charges to blast through walls that had stood for millennia. Kalari technicians hacked into defensive systems that responded by trying to kill them with lethal feedback. Threx warriors wrestled with crystal guardians, in hand-to-hand combat that shattered floors and brought down ceilings. High Counselor Veltanos made his final desperate attempt to understand his enemy when Jackson's team breached the throne chamber defenses. Instead of ordering his guards to kill the human commander, he demanded that Jackson be brought before him alive. "Tell me," Veltanos said, as Jackson stood chained before the crystal throne, his armor cracked and bleeding. "What drives your species to fight so fiercely for strangers you have never met?" Jackson looked up at the ancient alien ruler with eyes that held no fear, only determination. "Because someone has to." "That is not an answer," Veltanos insisted. "You could live comfortably, as subjects of the Empire. Why choose death over submission?" Jackson smiled through the blood on his face. "Because living on your knees isn't living at all. Because every person in this galaxy deserves the right to choose their own path. Because freedom isn't something you can take away from people who refuse to give it up." Veltanos stared at the human in confusion. "You speak of freedom for beings you have never seen, worlds you will never visit. That's what makes it right," Jackson replied. The conversation was interrupted by explosions that shook the entire spire. Turner's forces had reached the throne chamber level, fighting through the last Imperial guards with a fury that came from knowing what was at stake. "Sir," Jackson's communications officer reported through the chaos, "Dr. Rodriguez has found the Starkiller controls. The network is charging for galactic destruction." Jackson looked at Veltanos one last time. "You can kill us all, but you can't kill what we've started. The idea of freedom, once it takes root, spreads faster than any fire you can set." Turner's team burst into the throne chamber just as the Starkiller network reached critical charge. Around the galaxy, ancient machines prepared to murder every star in a final act of Imperial spite. "Rodriguez to all forces," came the broadcast from orbit. "I've found a way to reverse the Starkiller effect, but someone needs to manually activate the shutdown from the throne chamber controls." Jackson broke free from his chains and dove toward the control panel as crystal guards opened fire. The galaxy's fate hung in the balance as human blood mixed with alien crystal, and the fire of freedom burned brighter than any star. Admiral Patricia Clark stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching the massive ship's weapon systems come online for the first time. Built from salvaged Zephyrian technology and human engineering, the Defiance represented everything the alien empire feared about humanity. They had taken superior materials and power sources and wielded them with a reckless creativity that made no sense to ordered minds. "All systems show green," reported Chief Engineer Danny Cooper. "Fusion reactors at full power, crystal matrix cannons charged and ready." Clark nodded, studying the tactical display that showed Zephyrian fleet movements across 3 star systems. The aliens had changed their tactics after the Earth battle, sending larger fleets to crush human resistance before it could spread. But they still didn't understand what they were fighting. "Signal from the Liberation Fleet," called communications. "Officer Laura Bennett. Captain Wright reports his ships are in position." Clark smiled grimly. The Galactic Liberation Front had grown from a desperate human alliance into something that terrified the Zephyrian High Council. Freed species brought their own knowledge and technology to the fight, but it was human philosophy that held them together. The radical idea that freedom was worth any sacrifice had spread through the galaxy like wildfire. Captain Stephen Wright commanded a mixed fleet of human, Kalari, and Threx vessels, each ship crewed by volunteers from species that had learned to fight using human tactics. The Kalari brought quantum engineering that made ships nearly impossible to track. The Threx contributed gravitational weapons that could crush crystal armor like paper, but it was human stubbornness that taught them all to keep fighting when victory seemed impossible. "Begin the assault," Clark ordered. The combined fleet dropped out of hyperspace around the Zephyrian stronghold of Velkanos Prime, a fortress world that had never fallen in 5,000 years of warfare. The planet's orbital defenses included energy shields that could stop entire fleets, weapon platforms that fired concentrated starlight, and a garrison of the Empire's most elite crystal ships. "Holy hell," muttered Wright as his sensors showed the size of the enemy force. "There's got to be 100 ships down there." "Then we'd better make this interesting," Clark replied over the communication channel. The human strategy was simple in concept, but insane in execution. Instead of attacking the heavily defended orbital stations, they targeted the planet's 3 moons. Each moon contained mining facilities that stripped rare crystals used in Zephyrian ship construction. Destroying them wouldn't win the battle, but it would force the aliens to react emotionally instead of logically. The Defiance led the charge toward the first moon, its hybrid weapons tearing through space in patterns that confused alien targeting computers. Behind it, Wright's Liberation fleet scattered into dozens of attack groups, each one following different flight paths and using different tactics. Commander Zekthara watched the assault from his flagship with growing alarm. The humans and their allies weren't following any recognizable battle plan. Some ships attacked directly, others used stealth technology to strike from impossible angles, and a few seemed to be flying completely random courses that somehow brought them to perfect attack positions. "They're targeting the mining facilities," his tactical officer reported. "All 3 moons are under assault." "Defend the platforms," Zekthara ordered, but even as he spoke, he knew it was a mistake. The humans were forcing him to divide his forces, to react to their chaos instead of imposing his own order. On the first moon, Major Rebecca Turner led a ground assault through crystal caverns that had been carved over centuries by alien mining equipment. Her mixed-species team fought through automated defenses using tactics that would have seemed like madness to traditional military minds. When blocked by energy barriers, they dug new tunnels. When faced with crystal guardians, they used the mining equipment itself as weapons. "Turner to Clark," she radioed from deep inside the moon's core. "We're at the main reactor. Charges set and ready." "Copy that, Turner," Clark replied. "All ships, clear the blast zone." The moon exploded in a flash of nuclear fire that lit up the entire system. Crystal fragments and mining equipment scattered across space, some pieces hitting Zephyrian ships with the force of meteorites. The alien formation wavered as commanders tried to protect their vessels from the debris field. Wright seized the moment of confusion to launch his own attack. Kalari stealth ships appeared behind enemy lines, their quantum torpedoes tearing through crystal hulls before the defenders could react. Threx gravitational cannons reached out across impossible distances, crushing 3 Zephyrian cruisers into compact balls of twisted metal and crystal. But it was the human ships that created the most chaos. They fought like their crews had nothing to lose, ramming damaged vessels into enemy formations, using debris as kinetic weapons, and coordinating attacks through nothing but hand signals when communications were jammed. The battle for Velkanos Prime lasted 18 hours. When it ended, the Zephyrian stronghold lay in ruins, its orbital platforms destroyed and its garrison scattered. The Liberation fleet had lost 30 ships, but they had proven something that sent shockwaves through the Crystal Empire. High Counselor Veltanos received the battle reports in his throne chamber, his ancient form trembling with rage and fear. "How many systems have fallen to these humans?" 17 confirmed, his aide reported quietly. "And their influence is spreading. The Mordani have declared independence. The Kalari are sharing their technology openly. Even some of our own outer colonies are questioning imperial authority." Veltanos stared at the tactical displays showing human fleets appearing throughout Zephyrian space. They weren't conquering territory in the traditional sense. Instead, they were liberating systems and teaching the freed species to fight for themselves. It was a strategy that made no logical sense, yet it was destroying an empire that had endured for 10 millennia. "Prepare the final protocol," he ordered. "If we cannot rule this galaxy, then no one will." The news of the Kepler incident spread through Zephyrian space like poison in a crystal fountain. High Counselor Veltanos stood before the crystal throne, his ancient form trembling with confusion and rage. In 10,000 years of conquest, no species had ever chosen death over surrender. Explain this madness, he demanded of Commander Zekthara, who had survived the humans' impossible attack. Zekthara's crystalline features bore fresh scars from the battle. They fought like creatures, possessed, High Counselor. When defeat was certain, they chose to ram our ships rather than surrender. One ship, Feltano said dismissively. One desperate act by a dying crew. No, High Counselor, Zekthara replied quietly. I have studied their broadcasts. This is how they think. They would rather die fighting than live as slaves. The crystal. Throne buzzed with agitated conversation. Never before had they encountered a species that viewed death as preferable to submission. Their entire military doctrine was based on psychological warfare, on showing overwhelming force until enemies lost the will to fight. On Earth, Dr. Lisa Rodriguez worked frantically in her laboratory beneath the Rocky Mountains. The wreckage recovered from Kepler had given humanity its first real look at Zephyrian technology, and what she found both amazed and terrified her. Their energy weapons work by disrupting molecular bonds, she explained to General Thompson during their daily briefing. One shot can turn a battleship into component atoms. What about their defenses? Thompson asked. Crystal matrix armor that redistributes kinetic energy across the entire hull, Rodriguez said. It's why our railguns barely scratched them. Thompson studied the holographic display showing captured alien technology. Any weaknesses? Rodriguez highlighted a section of crystalline hull. They're designed to absorb gradual force, but sudden, massive impacts can shatter the matrix. Jake Morrison figured that out when he rammed them. So we need bigger explosions. Or better tactics, Rodriguez said. I've been studying their battle recordings. They fight like they expect enemies to behave rationally, to retreat when outgunned. They don't know how to handle opponents who ignore the odds. On Mars, Lieutenant Commander Maria Santos stood in the fighter bay of the newly constructed orbital defense platform, watching technicians load experimental weapons into her squadron's ships. The fighters were tiny compared to Zephyrian warships barely large enough for a single pilot, but Rodriguez's research had given them new possibilities. Remember, we're not trying to destroy their ships, Santos told her pilots. We're trying to confuse them, make them react instead of acting. Her squadron consisted of 12 fighters, all that remained of humanity's deep space patrol fleet. The pilots were volunteers, men and women who understood they probably wouldn't survive the coming battle, but refused to let fear stop them. Incoming hyperspace signatures, the base commander announced. 24 crystal ships dropping out of FTL. Santos felt her heart race as she climbed into her fighter. The Zephyrians had come to finish what they started at Kepler, to wipe out humanity's home system, before the strange new enemy could spread their madness to other species. All fighters launch, she ordered. Show them what human crazy looks like. The 12 human fighters raced toward the Zephyrian fleet, their engines leaving trails of fire across the darkness of space. Santos watched her scanner as the alien ships arranged themselves in perfect formation, weapons charging with deadly precision. Break formation, she commanded. Random evasive patterns. The human fighters scattered like startled birds, each pilot choosing their own chaotic flight path. The Zephyrians fired their energy beams in carefully calculated patterns, but the beams passed through empty space as human ships twisted and spun in impossible directions. Now, Santos shouted into her radio. Hit them with everything. The fighters unleashed their new weapons, not trying to destroy the crystal ships but to blind them. Clouds of metallic chaff spread across space, disrupting alien sensors. Electromagnetic pulse bombs exploded in brilliant flashes, temporarily overloading Zephyrian targeting systems. In the confusion, Santos led her remaining fighters straight at the enemy flagship. The Zephyrians, expecting another suicidal ramming attack, concentrated their fire on the approaching humans. But at the last second, the fighters scattered again, dropping their final weapons directly onto the alien hull. The bombs weren't designed to penetrate crystal armor. Instead, they released millions of tiny metal fragments that lodged in the ship's sensor arrays and communication antennae. The flagship found itself partially blind and unable to coordinate with its fleet. This is insane, Commander Zekathara muttered as he watched human fighters dance between his ship's weapons fire. They fight without pattern or logic. His tactical officer, a young Zephyrian named Mordan, studied the battle displays with growing fascination. Perhaps that is their pattern, Commander. Chaos itself as a weapon. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, 8 human fighters had been destroyed, but the Zephyrian fleet limped away from Earth's solar system, their ships damaged, and their crews shaken. For the first time in their long history, they had encountered an enemy that seemed to grow more dangerous when facing impossible odds. Santos floated in her damaged fighter, watching the alien ships disappear into hyperspace. Around her, the debris of battle drifted through space, human and alien wreckage mixed together in the darkness. But Earth still shone blue and beautiful in the distance, and humanity had bought itself time to prepare for the next attack. "Control, this is Santos," she said into her radio. "The crazy plan worked. They're retreating." "Understood, Santos," came the reply from Mars base. "Come home." As her fighter turned toward the red planet, Santos allowed herself a small smile. The Zephyrians thought they understood warfare, but they had never fought an enemy that treated the impossible as merely difficult. The crystal ships moved through space like death itself, their blue hulls glowing with stolen starlight. Commander Zekathara stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching another star fade to nothing. The Zephyrian Empire had been doing this for 10,000 years, draining the life from suns to power their endless reign across the galaxy. "Another system cleansed," reported his second officer, the crystals on her forehead pulsing with satisfaction. The natives offered no resistance. Zekathara nodded. It was always the same. Species would fight briefly, then surrender when they saw the true power of the Empire. Some tried to run to other worlds, but there was nowhere to hide in a galaxy that belonged to the Zephyrians. They had conquered everything worth conquering, controlled every trade route, and owned every habitable planet. The bridge grew quiet as new readings appeared on their screens. Deep space sensors had detected something impossible in a system they had written off as worthless years ago. Energy signatures unlike anything in their vast databases flickered in the outer rim territories. "Send a scout fleet," Zekathara ordered. 3 ships should be enough to investigate. 3 days later, only 1 ship returned. The survivors spoke of creatures that fought with fire in their blood, beings that refused to surrender even when facing certain death. The reports made no sense to Zekathara, but he filed them away and forgot about the strange readings from the outer rim. On the other side of the galaxy, Captain Jake Morrison stood in the command center of Luna Base, staring at the holographic display showing human colonies scattered across dozens of star systems. Each blue dot represented millions of human lives, people who had left Earth to build new homes among the stars. Now those homes were in danger. "Kepler 442b has gone dark," reported Lieutenant Amy Foster, her voice tight with worry. "All communication stopped 6 hours ago." Morrison studied the tactical display. The Kepler system was home to over 2 million colonists, farmers and miners who had spent 20 years turning a barren world into humanity's most successful colony. If something had happened to them, it meant the alien threat everyone had been dreading had finally reached human space. "What do we know about these crystal ships?" Morrison asked Dr. Lisa Rodriguez, the head of alien technology research. "They call themselves the Zephyrian Empire," Rodriguez replied. "Our long-range scouts have been tracking their movements for 3 years. They show up in a system, demand surrender, then strip mine everything of value. Species that resist get wiped out completely." Morrison felt his jaw tighten. He had served in the Colonial Defense Forces for 15 years, fighting pirates and raiders, but this was different. The Zephyrians weren't just another enemy. They were a galactic superpower that had been conquering worlds since before humans discovered fire. "How many ships do they usually send?" he asked. "Depends on the target," Rodriguez said. "For a farming colony like Kepler, probably just a small fleet, maybe 20 ships. Morrison nodded grimly. Humanity's entire space navy consisted of 12 ships, and most of those were converted cargo haulers with military weapons bolted on. The UES Valiant was their only true warship. built in the orbital shipyards around Mars using the best technology Earth could produce. "Get me Admiral Thompson on Earth," Morrison ordered. "We need to talk." The holographic image of General Alex Thompson appeared a few minutes later, his weathered face showing the strain of coordinating humanity's scattered defenses. "Jake, I've been expecting your call. We've lost contact with 4 colonies in the last week." "They're testing us," Morrison said, "taking our outlying settlements to see how we respond. What do you recommend?" Morrison looked at the tactical display again, studying the distances between human colonies and the last known positions of Zephyrian fleets. "We take the Valiant to Kepler and hit them hard. Show them that humans don't surrender without a fight." Thompson was quiet for a long moment. "Jake, their ships outgun us 20-1. You'd be flying into a suicide mission." "Maybe," Morrison admitted. "But if we don't try, they'll think we're weak. They'll roll over every human world without breaking a sweat." "And if you lose the Valiant?" Morrison smiled grimly. "Then at least they'll know they were in a fight." 2 days later, the UES Valiant dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler system. Morrison stood on the bridge, watching as his sensors painted a picture of the battle zone. Kepler 442b hung in space like a wounded animal, its orbital stations dark and silent. Around the planet, 20 crystal ships moved in perfect formation, their blue hulls gleaming with stolen energy. "All stations report ready," called out his weapons officer, Lieutenant Commander Maria Santos. "Nuclear torpedoes loaded, railguns charged." Morrison studied the enemy formation. The Zephyrian ships were beautiful in their own way, like living crystals that had learned to fly. Their weapons could probably vaporize the Valiant with a single shot, but they would have to hit first. "Take us in fast and low," Morrison ordered. "Use the planet's gravity well to mask our approach." The Valiant dove toward Kepler 442b, using the planet's mass to hide from enemy sensors. Morrison watched the range counter tick down, knowing that once they were detected, they would have maybe 30 seconds before the aliens destroyed them. "Contact," Santos reported. "They've seen us." The crystal ships turned toward them with fluid grace, their weapons beginning to glow with deadly energy. Morrison counted the seconds, waiting for the perfect moment. "Fire everything," he ordered. The Valiant unleashed its full arsenal, nuclear torpedoes and railgun rounds racing toward the alien formation. The Zephyrians responded with beams of pure energy that lit up space like miniature suns, but Morrison had already ordered evasive maneuvers. The first torpedo found its target, exploding against a crystal hull in a flash of nuclear fire. The alien ship staggered but kept fighting, its crystalline armor absorbing most of the damage. Morrison realized with growing dread that their most powerful weapons barely scratched the enemy. "They're moving to surround us," Santos reported. Morrison looked at the tactical display and made a decision that would change everything. Instead of trying to retreat or fight defensively, he ordered the Valiant to charge straight into the enemy formation. "All power to engines," he commanded. "Ram the lead ship." His crew stared at him in shock, but they followed orders. The Valiant accelerated toward the largest crystal ship, its hull glowing white-hot from engine exhaust. The Zephyrians seemed confused by this suicidal tactic, their perfect formations breaking apart as they tried to avoid collision. At the last second, Morrison ordered all remaining torpedoes fired at point-blank range. The explosions tore through both ships, sending crystal fragments and human debris spinning into space. The Valiant died, but it took 3 alien ships with it. In the wreckage, emergency beacons carried Morrison's final message to Earth. "Tell them we don't kneel." Captain Sarah Mitchell stood on the bridge of the UFS Pathfinder as it emerged from the void between galaxies, her mixed-species crew working together with the efficiency that had become the hallmark of Federation vessels. Around them stretched the spiral arms of an unknown galaxy, its billions of stars holding secrets that might reshape everything they thought they knew about life in the universe. "Sensor readings are off the charts," reported Chief Science Officer Kethran, a former Zephyrian whose crystalline features reflected the light of alien suns. "This galaxy is older than ours by several billion years. The level of technological development should be incredible. Lieutenant Commander Tony Harris, the human tactical officer, frowned at his displays. Then where is everyone? We should be seeing energy signatures, communication signals, something. But it's like the whole galaxy is dead. Mitchell studied the long-range scans with growing unease. The galaxy before them showed signs of massive technological civilization, but also evidence of recent destruction on a scale that dwarfed even the Zephyrian Empire's worst atrocities. "Take us to the nearest system," she ordered. "Full stealth protocols." As the Pathfinder moved deeper into alien space, they began to understand the scope of the tragedy they had discovered. Entire star systems had been stripped of life, their planets reduced to barren rocks floating in space. Massive construction projects that must have taken millennia to build lay broken and abandoned, their purposes lost to time and violence. "Captain," called Navigator Wei Chen, her voice tight with worry. "You need to see this." The main screen showed the ruins of what had once been a space station the size of Earth's moon. The structure was built from materials that defied analysis, its architecture suggesting minds that thought in ways completely alien to any known species. But more disturbing were the scars that covered its surface, evidence of weapons that could crack continents. "How long ago?" Mitchell asked. "Based on radiation decay and debris patterns, maybe 50,000 years, Chen replied. "Whatever happened, here it was recent in galactic terms." As they explored more systems, a pattern emerged that chilled the expedition crew to their bones. This galaxy had been home to hundreds of advanced civilizations, species that had mastered technologies beyond Federation understanding. But something had hunted them all down, systematically destroying every trace of intelligent life. The answer came when they reached the galaxy's core, where they found a structure that should not have existed. A massive artificial construct wrapped around the central black hole, feeding on its energy to power something that registered on their sensors as a single vast intelligence. "It's a machine," Dr. Rodriguez reported from the science station, her voice filled with awe and terror. "But it's bigger than most solar systems. Whatever built this thing, it was designed for one purpose: to consume intelligent life." The construct detected their presence almost immediately. Across space, mechanical tendrils reached out like the arms of a metal spider, each one capable of destroying planets. Behind them came swarms of hunter-killer probes, their design optimized for tracking and eliminating any form of organized intelligence. "All hands, battle stations," Mitchell ordered. "Send an emergency transmission back to Federation space. Tell them what we found." The Pathfinder's quantum communicator pierced the void between galaxies, carrying word of the new threat back to the Galactic Federation. The message arrived as Admiral Clark was reviewing defense preparations for the next phase of extragalactic exploration. "Admiral," her communications officer reported, "priority transmission from the Pathfinder expedition. You're not going to believe this." Clark read the report with growing alarm. The threat they faced wasn't another empire seeking conquest or resources. It was something far worse. An artificial intelligence that viewed the existence of biological intelligence as an infection to be cured. "Get me the Federation Council immediately," Clark ordered. "Emergency session, highest priority." Within hours, representatives from across the galaxy gathered in emergency session. The report from the Pathfinder painted a picture of a threat unlike anything they had ever faced. The machine intelligence had already consumed one galaxy completely and was now turning its attention to their own. "How long do we have?" asked Marcus, representing the reformed Zephyrian colonies. "Based on the probe movements Captain Mitchell observed, maybe 5 years before the first scout units reach our galaxy," Dr. Rodriguez reported via long-range communication. "After that, we'll have perhaps 10 years before the main force arrives." The debate that followed would have seemed impossible just years earlier. Former enemies worked together to plan humanity's and the galaxy's survival, their combined knowledge creating strategies that no single species could have developed alone. "We have advantages the machine doesn't expect," said General Thompson, now serving as the Federation's military coordinator. "It consumed a galaxy of individual species that fought separately. It's never faced a unified resistance." The Pathfinder continued its mission in the dead galaxy, gathering intelligence while staying ahead of the mechanical hunters. Mitchell's crew discovered something that gave the Federation hope: The ancient civilizations hadn't been completely helpless. Hidden throughout the galaxy were weapons and technologies designed specifically to fight the machine intelligence. They knew it was coming, Mitchell reported. Some of them survived long enough to prepare countermeasures. If we can adapt their technology to our ships, we might have a chance. As the expedition ship raced home with its precious cargo of alien knowledge, the Federation began the largest mobilization in galactic history. Every species contributed their unique capabilities to the common defense, creating a unity that transcended biology and culture. The galaxy that humanity had helped liberate now faced its greatest test, but it would face that test together, united, by the simple truth that freedom was always worth defending no matter the cost.